this is his actual bunker. And it really looks like kind of an Aztec pyramid or some Egyptian structure from ancient times, because it's just so monumentally huge, gigantic.
Historians are shocked again as sailors discover lost bunkers from World War II, and what they found inside left them horrified. Back in the 1930s and 1940s, governments, especially Nazi Germany and Japan, created different underground bunkers where they stored weapons, chemicals, and even prisoners. Now, sailors have looked into a bunker from the war, and you won't believe all that has been discovered. Sailors discover World War II era bunker. Sailors recently stumbled upon what appears to be a long-forgotten bunker from the Second World War, hidden deep in a forest along the old defenses of the Atlantic Wall. The bunker, which is now in a state of near collapse and partially buried beneath earth and detritus, may have once formed part of a coastal defense network. The bunker might have protected an airfield or a stretch of Atlantic coastline. Inside, the sailors discovered relics that speak to the daily reality of wartime life. They found an ammunition box still bearing its original locks, several coils of German barbed wire, and even a complete, still functional air pump with the hose and filter intact. There were other artifacts, like a bucket or a gas mask filter component, although it's unclear whether those came from this very bunker. The structure itself seems to have been robustly built, with thick concrete walls that might have been lined with bitumen or another sealant to keep out moisture. This is typical of German World War II bunkers. Yet, decades of neglect, shifting soil, and perhaps forest growth have taken a heavy toll. Roof sections have collapsed, debris has caved in, and much of what remains lies partly underground, obscured from view. The degraded condition isn't as bad as you might even expect, and it shows how much effort the soldiers put into constructing this bunker. Nearly 80 years after the war had ended, remnants of wartime infrastructure continue to lurk, largely undetected, beneath forests, dunes, and fields. Every rediscovery offers a tangible connection to history. But now, historians suspect that this might not be the end. The large scale of the Atlantic Wall and the efforts that were invested in fortifications make them question how much is still hidden. There might be countless more bunkers in that place, half-buried, collapsed, or masked by foliage that still hold items from the war. This discovery is quite similar to another recent finding. In one coastal dune restoration project in Belgium, 3 intact bunkers, hidden under mere inches of oil and sand, were uncovered, revealing more terrifying items from the war. Belgium uncovers 3 buried bunkers. In 2024, while a nature restoration team was quietly trimming back invasive plants at Willemspark, which is a dune-covered park in Nokkerheist on Belgium's northwest coast, workers made a shocking discovery. There, he found 3 long-lost bunkers from the Second World War, hidden just a few inches under the sand. It was an extraordinary find. The bunkers, built by the German occupying forces during World War II, belong to a class known as Gruppenunterstand Vieh, F2 bunkers. Each measures roughly 6 by 7 meters externally and boasts walls and a roof of 1 meter thick, reinforced concrete. This is another proof of how intense the war was and how they fortified forts and bunkers. Inside and around the bunkers, the excavation team uncovered more than mere concrete shells. They revealed fragments of a complex wartime infrastructure. Experts found brick-lined trenches, a section of concrete track that once carried supplies or personnel, and even a well. Among the rubble, there were everyday objects like utensils, cables, and water pipes, and remnants consistent with military use, like ammunition debris and other supplies. The story behind these bunkers traces back to Belgium's role in fortifying its coasts against Allied invasion. During the war, this stretch was incorporated into the gargantuan Atlantic Wall, the same place that sailors discovered the lost WWII bunker. This wall is a vast network of coastal fortifications built by the German army between 1942 and 1944. At Knokke Heist, the defensive complex was known as Stützpunkt Heist, and it reportedly encompassed around 60 military structures. It had everything from ammunition bunkers and radar forward posts to barracks and heavy artillery positions. Long after the war, fortifications like these were deliberately demolished so no one would get their secrets or buried under sand and soil. In fact, these 3 bunkers in Wilhelmspark had dunes above, and the park became a peaceful public space. This masked the violent history underneath. Many of these hidden bunkers can act as a time capsule, taking historians and experts back to the time of the war. One of these was found in France, which was long forgotten since the end of the war. Gironde, France, World War II bunker. In France's Gironde region, deep on the Atlantic coast of the Arcachon Basin, a remarkable slice of wartime history has resurfaced. Hidden for decades beneath layers of earth and almost forgotten by time, the sealed bunker, dating back to World War II, was reopened in 2015 after more than 70 years. The bunker was about 120 square meters in size and had been built in 1943 under the German occupation as part of the vast coastal defense network known as the Atlantic Wall. When archaeologists from the Archaeological Research Group of the Atlantic Wall pried open the sealed entrance, they were greeted by a scene that felt like a time capsule. Inside, there were metal-framed beds, communications equipment, electrical generators, and other gear. The bunker was meant to sustain a small garrison of soldiers. The bunker's design and content point towards it being a command post for headquarters for the southwestern stretch of the Atlantic coast. Like many other German wartime constructions, the walls were nearly 2 meters thick with heavy fortification. It was built to withstand bombardment and protect the personnel inside. The underground space, once sealed and lost to memory, remained untouched for decades until urban development plans triggered a search of archives. During an excavation, they found the bunker's entrance underground, with doors long bolted shut since about 1946 and no recorded visits for decades. This bunker had quietly slumbered beneath the soil while the world above moved on. But when they reopened it, they saw the lives of the soldiers who might have communicated with the outside world through telephone lines while waiting and preparing for a battle that they might have never seen. The discovery casts light on the scale and thoroughness of wartime coastal defenses in Gironde and serves as a reminder of how many relics of history remain buried, waiting to be rediscovered. And not just in France, but also in Scotland, a hidden bunker was discovered and was part of secret bases during the war. Scotland Unknown Bunker. In a quiet forest in southern Scotland, a piece of hidden history recently came to light. There was a previously unknown World War II era bunker that had been buried and nearly erased from memory, and this was rediscovered by forestry workers. The bunker, roughly 7 meters long by 3 meters wide, had been part of a secret network of hideouts used by a covert resistance force during the war. The story begins during routine tree felling operations in a wooded area near Moffat. Among dense bracken and forest undergrowth, a survey technician named Kit Roger remembered from childhood tales that something lay hidden beneath the forest floor. After some careful searching, he and a colleague discovered a shallow trench leading to a narrow hatch. Once uncovered, the interior revealed the bare bones of what had once been a clandestine wartime hideout. Built with corrugated iron, arching over a cement floor, and topped with robust roof caps and blast walls, the bunker was designed for discretion and survival. On the floor, there were remnants of timber, like the rotting remains of bed frames, and a solitary, empty tin can, which shows the meager meals that they used to eat. Most of the furnishings, like the tables, stove, or beds, have decayed beyond recognition. Historians believe that this bunker belonged to one of the units of auxiliary units, a secret branch of the UK's wartime defence structure, often called Churchill's Secret Army. These men were trained for guerrilla warfare, including sabotage, ambushes, demolition, and resistance, and they were prepared to strike if Nazi forces invaded. Unlike the more familiar Home Guard, the auxiliaries operated in extreme secrecy, and many of their bunkers were intended to be used only once because of privacy. At its peak, a small garrison of around 7 men would have lived in this cramped underground hideout, armed with revolvers, submachine guns, a sniper rifle, and explosives. They were ready to emerge from the forest shadows and disrupt enemy operations when needed. It's only because of their extreme secrecy that these bunkers were concealed, only to be accidentally uncovered years later. Experts have stumbled upon even stranger bunkers in the past, with more discoveries than what the sailors saw when they discovered lost World War II bunkers. One of these is Project Riese, perhaps one of the craziest bunkers of that time. Project Riese Bunker. Deep within the forested slopes of the Sudetes Mountains in Lower Silesia lies Project Riese, one of the most ambitious and mysterious undertakings of World War II. Begun in 1943 under the Nazi regime, Riese consisted of 7 major underground complexes carved into solid rock beneath the mountains and even beneath a castle. When the tunnels and halls of Riese were rediscovered decades later, archaeologists found what seems to be a ghost city frozen in time. In a complex known as Osoka, there's a sizable building above ground, believed to be an officer's mess or headquarters, with rooms still showing original construction details. Nearby, there's a power station building that is partly intact, complete with manholes, hoppers, and conduits. It seems like they had plans to supply electricity to the subterranean city. Inside the mountain tunnels, raw rock walls stand next to shafts that would have provided ventilation or access. These tunnels rise into halls as high as 10 to 12 meters, with cavernous spaces meant to house large-scale operations. Many of these concrete-lined corridors and chambers were once guarded and ready for wartime use. The sheer scale and layout of Project Riese hint at grand designs. Some historians believe parts of it, especially beneath Casillas Castle, were intended as command centers or headquarters for the Nazi elite, especially for Adolf Hitler. Meanwhile, the vast walls inside Vlodars or Osovka are connected by narrow-gauge railways, water reservoirs, machinery foundations, power stations, and sewage and water systems. These point towards industrial ambitions. They might have had underground factories or weapons production shelters relocated to avoid Allied bombing raids. Tragically, the human cost was immense. The vast tunnels were born of forced labor, built by POWs and concentration camp prisoners who endured brutal conditions. Many succumbed to disease, malnutrition, and exhaustion. But not all bunkers are underground, like the ones we've found. Nazi Germany once built a massive and imposing bunker complex, and it would shock you what they had in there. La Coupole, V-weapon bunker. Deep in the chalky hills of northern France, there's La Coupole, a vast, imposing bunker complex from the Second World War. It has transformed into a haunting museum of ambition, terror, and technology. Conceived by Nazi engineers in 1943 to 1944 under the codename WWII 21, La Coupole was meant to be a key node in the German long-range missile program, a launching base for the dreaded V2 rocket, aimed squarely at London and southern England. It was built into a disused chalk quarry near Riese and Helffout. The complex's most striking feature is its enormous concrete dome. It was a hemispherical canopy, some 70-odd meters wide and 5 meters thick, weighing tens of thousands of tons, designed to shield the deadly facility from Allied bombing raids. Under that dome, there was a labyrinth of tunnels carved into chalk walls with storage chambers, fuel depots, rocket assembly halls, workshops, barracks, and even a liquid oxygen production facility. The planned vertical shafts would have allowed rockets to be elevated ready for launch and transported via tunnel-built rail tracks out to launch pads. But despite the scale and ambition of the project, La Coupole never fired a single rocket. From early 1944, the Allies, aware of the V-weapon threat, bombarded the site repeatedly under Operation Crossbow. Heavy raids, including the devastating payloads of 12,000-pound tallboy bombs, battered the hillsides and undermined the geological integrity under the dome. The dome itself proved tough to destroy, but the supporting tunnels and infrastructure were destabilized beyond repair. By mid-1944, the Germans abandoned the project and fled as Allied forces advanced. Unfortunately, this dome could only be a success due to forced laborers like French conscripts, Soviet prisoners, and others who toiled under brutal conditions to build this monstrous edifice. When the Allies captured the site in September 1944, investigations confirmed what everyone suspected. La Coupole had been designed as a cutting-edge launch base for V2 rockets. For decades, the quarry lay abandoned, and the tunnel was sealed until it opened in 1997 as a public museum. Meanwhile, Nazi Germany made another bunker in France, and the main purpose of this was simply to land bombs in England. Siracourt 5, one bunker. Deep in the Pas-de-Calais region of northern France, there's the Siracourt 5, one bunker, a massive concrete colossus built by Nazi Germany. It had a chilling goal of launching deadly flying bombs towards England. The bunker was built in 1943. Its designers employed a radical construction technique. They laid a massive reinforced concrete roof on the ground, then excavated beneath it to build the interior. It was a method meant to shield the structure from aerial bombardment. The bunker was enormous, about 215 meters long, 36 meters wide, and 10 meters high. It wasn't meant to be a storage facility, but a fully operational hub. It had V1 bombs, delivered by rail via a connection to the main Saint-Paul-Abbeville line. These were stored, prepared, and then launched from traps concealed deep inside. The facility was planned to house up to 150 missiles. As soon as construction began, in September 1943, Allied reconnaissance spotted the massive complex. What followed was an intense bombing campaign, as 27 Allied air raids over several months pummeled Siracourt. By June 1944, with about 90% of the concrete shell already in place, the bunker suffered a direct hit from a devastating 6-ton tallboy bomb dropped from RAF Lancasters. The explosion penetrated the roof and detonated underground, while other bombs smashed into the walls and churned the surrounding terrain. In total, around 5,070 tons of bombs were dumped on the site, making Siracourt perhaps the most heavily bombed military target in Europe during the war. Regardless of the size and aim, the bunker was never completed, and it didn't fire a single V-1 rocket. Its purpose was unfulfilled and abandoned by the Germans around April 1944. In the post-war years, instead of demolishing the hulking structure, authorities left it standing. Some dismantling occurred, like the launching ramps being removed and parts of the interior being partially filled, but the ruin remains visible to this day. During the Second World War, Nazi Germany didn't only make bunkers for holding weapons and soldiers, but also produced deadly chemical substances that were going to be used in the war. Falkenhagen Bunker. In the woods north of the small town of Falkenhagen, in Germany, there's one of the most mysterious and ambitious underground military bunkers from the Second World War. Conceived in the late 1930s, this sprawling bunker factory was intended to produce a deadly chemical substance known as chlorine trifluoride, and even the nerve agent sarin. Construction began around 1939, when they built a 4-story structure deep underground, and it was covered with about 10 to 15 meters of earth for secrecy and protection. The bunker facility spanned roughly 14,000 square meters and featured underground railway tunnels that linked remote production halls, storage areas, and logistical passages. It gave the site the feel of a subterranean city. Inside, the design was pragmatic. It had rail-accessible tunnels for transporting raw materials and products, concrete-lined halls meant to house volatile chemical processes, storage chambers, ventilation shafts, exhaust systems, and safety installations to contain dangerous gases. Above ground, ventilation towers and emergency exits broke the forest canopy. The ambition was staggering. The facility was projected to churn out 50 tons of N-stoff per month. Yet by 1945, when advancing Soviet forces captured it, the production had delivered only 30 to 50 tons, and the planned sarin processing section was never completed. N-stoff itself was corrosive, volatile, and devastating, but fortunately, it was never deployed in combat. After the war, the bunker did not vanish into oblivion. The occupying Soviet forces recognized its potential and overhauled it between 1958 and the mid-1960s into a classified command and control center for the Warsaw Pact. The subterranean halls were refurbished, new ceilings inserted, ventilation and media systems updated, and the complex expanded to accommodate a military village. It was complete with housing, recreational facilities, and even a theater and shops. The once sinister chemical plant had become a Cold War nerve center. By 1993, after the collapse of the Soviet presence in Germany, the site was abandoned. All signs of life disappeared, and the bunker shells remained. Some blast doors and diesel tanks were still intact in the early 2000s. While this bunker was meant to create sinister chemicals, there was another one used to make factories and even worked as a concentration camp. Mittelbau Dora bunkers. In the rugged hills of the Königstein Mountain near Nordhausen, Germany, there's Mittelbau Dora, one of the most haunting and historically significant bunker tunnel complexes of World War II. It was originally carved out as underground fuel storage caverns, and the site was transformed by the Nazi regime into a vast weapons factory and concentration camp system when the daylight factories became too vulnerable to Allied bombing. What was found in Mittelbau Dora is chilling. There were miles of tunnels wide enough to carry twin standard gauge railroad tracks, galleries filled with parts of missiles and bombs, assembly halls frozen in mid-production, and sleeping tunnels where the forced laborers often starving and diseased, tried to rest on rickety, 4-story wooden bunks. Exploration of the site by current memorial authorities shows ruined machinery, scattered V-2 rocket components, and collapsed rock. It was just as the facility was left when it was abandoned in 1945. This bunker network played an important role in the war. After the British bombing raid on the original rocket development facilities at Peenemünde in August 1943, Nazi leadership decided to shift production on the deadly V-2 rocket and other weapons into the safety of the mountains. From late 1943 to early 1945, prisoners from nearby camps, tens of thousands of them, dug, blasted, laid rails, installed ventilation and machinery, and assembled rockets in near-total darkness and under brutal conditions. When working on this bunker, many of them died from exhaustion, disease, malnutrition, or collapse of unstable tunnels. When the site was liberated on the 11th of April 1945 by US troops, the horror became visible. The tunnels were lined with missiles and parts, ventilation systems still running, and evacuation routes blocked. This was evidence of an abandoned factory where work stopped abruptly as American forces closed in. Above ground and within nearby subcamps, countless corpses lay uncounted, inmates starved or shot while being forced on deadly death marches. Estimates suggest that of some 60,000 prisoners passed through the site, around 20,000 lost their lives. Ever since sailors discovered lost World War II bunkers, what they found inside left them shocked. From weapons and chemicals to concentration camps and bombs, which of these bunkers shocked you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.